Hey, listen to Wrestling Roundup, FreeFM 89.0, this is Grady Hooker, and today live on Skype we have nobody. Sadly, our recording time didn't line up with anybody today, and Brandon's at school, and Josh is at work. So you're going to get just me talking to you for half an hour. I've made sure to make the songs extra long. But I'd talk a little about Raw just before heading into speculating about the pay-per-view. The WWE World Title Tournament continued, and it seems Triple H is going to shake hands with anybody. I believe he shook hands with like Cesaro, Owens, Alberto. There's just a bunch of more small connections made there. People got very excited at the Cesaro handshake. I believe the poll they did for who do you want to win from the remaining 8 competitors, Cesaro came out on top with something like 40% of the vote. But we've got Roman Reigns versus Cesaro, which some people said is a really great match, some people said is not a very good match. I saw it as quite fine of a match. I think most people who said it was a bad match just didn't like the outcome, but Roman Reigns was always going to come out on top. He was always going to make it to the final. At the moment, it's really just who wins the other semi-final that's a little up in the air and not as concrete. We had Alberto Dario versus Callisto, and although Alberto Dario won, Callisto put on an awesome showing for like a good singles run at this point. I don't know if he's going to continue his singles run or if he's going to go back with Sin Cara and the Lucha Dragons. They seemed pretty poised for a tag title shot, so I'm not entirely sure there, but they definitely laid the seeds for an Alberto Callisto feud. So I don't know if Triple H is getting a team. It seems a bit weird for him to be getting a team now with guys who are busy for the pay-per-view, but getting a team of guys maybe to replace Rollins, or if he was just scouting when he was shaking everybody's hand. But you know, the Mix America storyline seemed as though that was going to collide with Jack Swagger, but Jack Swagger's a little busy, unless he's going to come out and ruin Alberto at the pay-per-view. So we don't know where that's going, but Alberto has feuds with Cena when he comes back, Jack Swagger with Zeb, and Callisto whenever they want to pull those off. And I think it's great that when Alberto's just come back and they're already setting up multiple feuds. I think the only other guy who they really did that with, especially down on NXT, was Kevin Owens. Kevin Owens came into NXT and he pretty much had a feud running with everybody on the roster, which is quite an impressive feat. And he pulled it off. And then when he went to the main roster, I guess we just forgot all of his feuds. We also had the massive, air quotes around massive, I guess, contract signing for the WWE Divas Championship match for some reason, which main evented the show. It was the final segment on the show. And I understand that they're trying to give the Divas more spotlight. It was okay to put them there. I don't know if they pulled it off, though, or if it seemed raw. I don't know the descriptive verb there, so I'll default to raw. Not the god of sun, the noise that a cat makes. But we've got the two of them are now going to face off, and we got a little bit of a brawl. But the main talking point that everyone's talking about was bringing up Charlotte's brother Reed's death. And it seemed as though Charlotte obviously agreed, I'm going to presume. They wouldn't have done it, I don't think, otherwise. Paige had to pull the line off. She's embracing the heat she's getting at the moment. But it seems Charlotte's mum, and I don't know what Flair's reaction was, but Charlotte's mum doesn't seem all too happy. And the fans didn't seem all too happy. It seemed like a cheap shot that they didn't need to take. They could have just rolled on without mentioning it and kept building the feud. But that's what people say. But it did get everyone talking about the feud. The feud had minimal backstory before this, just with Paige turning on PCB. And now it's got serious heat behind it. People are talking about it. And maybe that's what they needed. Maybe they wanted this to be the Divas feud that people actually talk about. The last one I think was probably Sasha Bailey at down in NXT. But they're not going to get that sort of momentum up here on the main roster anytime soon. We also had Kane and The Undertaker. They had some druids with them, but their druids turned out to be Bray Wyatt's flock, and they all had sheep masks. Now, I gotta say, I skimmed through the best bits of this segment, and it really confused me that there were druids and masks, but it was a cool effect. They always seemed to play off that the druids were on Brothers of Destruction's side, and they definitely seem to be saying along the lines of, no one is on your side, it is just you two against everyone who's on my team. Which, although they've booked the Brothers of Destruction versus two members of the Wyatt family, it still looks like a Survivor Series 4-on-4 match is more likely. I don't know how, but it just seems like that is more likely. With maybe not Brock Lesnar like we used to be suggesting, but someone else coming in, and then a Finn Balor or a Baron Corbin from NXT coming up to fill in the NXT spot. And that would be a much better match, in my opinion, especially if this is, Taker's heading out tour. But it seems as though they're lacking that at the moment. On the current card, we don't have any traditional Survivor Series match booked, and we have 5 matches booked. And 5 is quite a low amount when we have like one SmackDown before the pay-per-view. Kevin Owens obviously can't defend his title, and Alberto can't defend his because they're both in the tournament. So, who knows what's going to happen there. But what I do know is that Kevin Owens defeated Neville to move on into the tournament, and Dean Ambrose defeated Dolph Ziggler in what people were saying was a great match. But that was pretty predictable. I think this Final Four was everybody's Final Four, and they guessed it. The 8 was a little less predictable because of Callisto and a couple others that were surprising, but we still got the same 4 that we were expecting heading into the pay-per-view. And the final 2 will be Reigns versus either Owens or Ambrose. And which one of them? That's a good question. Someone who won't be at Survivor Series is our classic entrance theme owner. It is Yoshitatsu. And you're back, Wrestling Roundup, FreeFM 89.0, Grady Hooker, episode 139-ish. We were just talking about Raw and everybody in the tournament, so I thought I'd recap what the Survivor Series card looks like right now. So we're going to put both the semi-finals on the show. They're probably going to be the opening matches, but Roman Reigns is going to take on Alberto Dario, and Dean Ambrose is going to take on Kevin Owens. And we were talking earlier about, on the show like a couple of weeks ago, that on the right-hand side of the brackets, the non-Reigns side of the bracket, it was always going to be either Owens or Ambrose. No one else there sort of stood out as a competitor. And on the left-hand side, nobody really stood out as a competitor other than Reigns. Maybe Sheamus, but Sheamus has the briefcase, so you probably don't want to put him in the final. Whether he's a factor, that's still to be seen. I can still see some way where Dean, for some reason, turns on Reigns, and then, in the end, it doesn't matter because Sheamus cashes in, and that opens up a 3-way feud or a couple of feuds, depending on which way he wants to go. And it might just get him ready. It might lead to Ambrose versus Reigns, which probably would not be the best of feuds if the WWE is still trying to get Reigns over, just because Ambrose seems to get chairs wherever he goes and whatever gimmick he's trying to pull off. So if Ambrose is getting chaired, you're probably going to get Roman booed. But if you put him up against Sheamus, who's one of the guys with like nuclear heat right now, because nobody likes him and he evolves every time he comes out, you might get some chairs for Roman, and you might build him up as that guy that you want to win. Because the crowd will be saying anyone but you, not at Roman this time, but at Sheamus. And we've also got Kevin Owens, if he makes it into the final. And the three of us, me, Brandon, and Josh, were talking about when Seth got injured, who the biggest heels were at the moment, and we pretty much unanimously agreed that Seth was the biggest. But just below that, Kevin Owens wasn't far behind in a lot of our lists. And it seemed as though Kevin Owens is getting quite a lot of heat in terms of he can pull off that I'm a bad guy and I'm going to do bad guy things. And he's interesting while he does it. He doesn't necessarily need the Intercontinental title that he's carrying around. But if you see his backstage segments, I don't know if they are WWE.com exclusives or if they're actually on the show at this point. But he's pulling off funny as well. Basically, the guy was really awesome on NXT. He's come up to the main roster and he's managed to transfer that. A lot of the NXT people who have come up have not been able to transfer how great they were down in NXT and transfer that up to the main roster. Emma is probably the best example. Adam Rose, both of which were doing great down in NXT on their gimmicks. But when they brought them up to the main roster, their gimmicks didn't exactly float the boat of the WWE universe. There's also a couple of other numerous people, but Kevin's gimmick is so internationally seen as just the absolute bad guy, and other words I can't say on the radio, but and everybody knows what that means. Everybody knows that he's the bad guy. Everybody knows that you don't want to mess with him. He's the annoying guy who's going to annoy you the whole way through. And it didn't take long for WWE Universe to pick up on that, pull through, learn the gimmick, and move on, compared to other gimmicks that had multiple facets and you had to figure them out. Which is one fear I have with Finn Balor, or Balor, when he comes up to the main roster, is that it might not transfer well and that the WWE Universe might be left confused. But hopefully that doesn't happen. So my guess is going to be Roman Reigns versus Kevin Owens. I'm going to take a shot there. I'm going to go on the outside odds, and I'm going to put Kevin in the final. Not saying that Dean won't have a impact on the finals match, but I think that Kevin Owens will make it to the finals match. And now those are pretty much all the matches. We have those two semis, then the final of that tournament, Charlotte Paige, and the tag team, The Undertaker and Kane versus two members of the Wyatt family. So the card's pretty empty at the moment. It'll be interesting to see what happens on SmackDown, which is taped today when we record. So on Friday when this comes out, you should know the rest of the card of Survivor Series, and it will be interesting to see what I just pointed at the microphone for some reason. You guys seem to think what will happen. We'll probably share our predictions of the matches that haven't been announced yet, since the other two couldn't have their opinions today. And we'll see how that goes. It'll be interesting because they've got small feuds that they can bundle together. They've still got to shiv together a Survivor Series match, whether they're going to convert Undertaker Kane or if they're going to add a new one. Nobody knows. You've got enough lower card guys with the Cesaro, Stardust section, so the Ascension as well. Lucha Dragons. We don't have a tag team title match on there. There's plenty of different facets you can go for in terms of making a Survivor Series match. I'd prefer 2 to be on the card, but are we going to get 2? Probably not. I think if you see Kane and The Undertaker versus the Wyatts coming on early, and that's like first hour, then expect them to be on later in a Survivor Series match. I think there's still a chance they pull that live on the crowd. Maybe they get attacked. And they're like, oh, well, we need some backup, because obviously the 2 of you are not staying out of this match, which means there's 4 of you and 2 of us. We'll go find some people, and then we see Finn and whoever else. Brock Lesnar. I'll stick with that. It'll be interesting. I keep saying that. I keep saying it'll be interesting. And the reason is because every time we're talking about pay-per-views, and was that pay-per-view good? The thing I always bring up is, was I expecting what happened? And if I was expecting what happened, then no, it probably wasn't an interesting pay-per-view to me. But if there was a shocker, because with Alberto Dario coming back, that was one of the ones. It was, who'd you expect to come back? I had a massive list. Alberto wasn't on it. And then he came in, and that made the pay-per-view good for me. It was something I didn't expect, something that was a surprise. And it's hard to pull those off now. So, it will be interesting to see if they try to pull another surprise off, whether it is using someone from NXT or otherwise. Talking of NXT, see, I got that segue better. There is a new diva down there called Asuka. And she is scary crazy. And this is her entrance theme. And welcome back to Wrestling Roundup, FreeFM 9.0, Grady Hooker. I was just reading through the break that Kevin Owens engaged in a Twitter feud with Melissa Joan Hart. If you don't know who she is, I'm probably speaking to the older audience at this point, but she was Sabrina the Teenage Witch and been in a bunch of different shows afterwards. Kevin Owens basically had I'd call it a Twitter feud, back and forth, where Melissa said Kevin needs a little bit of work, and he ended up blocking her, and I'm pretty sure it made WWE.com news as well, but the announcers mentioned it, and then Big E, of course, hashtag I stand with Owens, and blocked her, so it looks like none of the heels are getting any tweets from Melissa Joan Hart now at this point. Just, if you want to get your voice out there, I know you're listening, Melissa Joan Hart. You're welcome on the show anytime to discuss the wrestling matters. And, we all know that Big E and Kevin Owens are listening to this, so we can just be the segue bit in the middle. But it is interesting that a lot of the celebrity interactions now, they used to be very forced, whether it was Mike Tyson, which was still a good one, Floyd Mayweather, Snooki, a bunch of them were very forced. They were just shoved into the feud. Nowadays it seems very organic. We had the Stephen Amell Stardust, which was really organic to me. Jon Stewart, although a little disappointing, still pulled off the organic look. If this leads to anything, then Melissa Joan Hart makes sense. Probably not, especially with Owens and Big E. I don't know how long that would work. But you also have Wade Barrett and Wayne Rooney. That started, I believe, on Twitter as well. So I think Twitter is just such an easy method for wrestling fans, celebrities to interact with the wrestlers. And then if they start a little tussle of a story going on, and then it's so much easier to transfer that to the ring or onto TV, where it doesn't seem so forced. And I think that was a big letdown of a couple of the guys, or a couple of the guys who they brought on, not lately, but before that. So hopefully, whoever we end up getting for WrestleMania, because obviously it'll be one, will be just as organic and just as smooth of a transition. Personally, any of the people I just listed, I'd be happy with, and their feuds make sense, which is really the important part. Not, Snooki just teaming up with John Morrison and Trish Stratus for some reason. I think that was the group. I have no idea. But we got to look forward, of course, because although Survivor Series is coming up this weekend, we still... The Royal Rumble is probably the next sort of benchmark or target that we're aiming at. But we've got a pay-per-view before that, and that's TLC. And with TLC, of course, I think the Dudley Boys are probably going to be involved in that one, right? But it's the one just before the Royal Rumble, so that's where you've really got to sort out your stuff. At Royal Rumble, you need to have your 30 guys ready, and then your undercards set up. And I think since you're heading into the Rumble is so easy to make storylines. All you really have to do is tussle about in the ring for a little while and have him over the top rope, and boom, you got a storyline. So you got to make sure you have some heading into that, but you don't need all of them, because you've got the Rumble to make those storylines. It's almost a lazy booking way. It's not, but it's almost a lazy booking way of making feuds, because you can just make so many of them so fast. So it'll be interesting also to see, coming up into the Royal Rumble, what they're going to do with Kane, Bray, Wyatt, everybody who's essentially in a feud now, because there's a lot of them, if they're going to stick with that feud through TLC and then into the Royal Rumble, or into the match itself. And nobody really knows. I think that's looking forward a bit far. But at TLC, are we going to get our tables match, our ladders match, and our chairs match, no matter how bad the chairs match? Surprisingly, the chairs matches are good, but the stipulation is not pretty. All of the others make sense. That's just, you can use a steel chair. But I think TLC, if everybody's complaining about Survivor Series not being Survivor Series yet, until the matches are announced on SmackDown, I think people might not be too happy with TLC. Because those matches generally you want to use as a feud builder if you've already got one going. Then you put them in the ladder match, or you put them in the tables match. And I don't know if we have any feuds that are going long enough at this point to put them in that. We don't have many going into this pay-per-view now, Survivor Series. We have the Wyatts and the brothers, and we have Charlotte Paige. But everybody knows they're not going to put the Divas into a stipulation match, no matter how stupid that is. And then you've got maybe one or two other feuds that you can extend into those gimmick matches. So I don't know if we're going to see too many gimmick matches, or if they're just going to be very forced, and it's going to be new feuds going into the gimmick matches. Which, is not my choice. If I got to choose, it would be built feuds going into it. But, we don't always get to choose, and that seems to be a thread going lately, that we get what we're given. And some people enjoy that, like myself, because if I was given what I wanted all the time, it would be very boring, because it's everything I want. A part of the reason that I watch wrestling is that things are different, things are surprising, occasionally, and it's not always what I'm expecting or what I want. So being given stuff that isn't necessarily what I want, I see as an upside, and it doesn't degrade the product, but it makes the product more interesting if you stick around and actually watch the product. So that's about all the time we got for this week. Thanks for listening to me for half an hour. I know it's a long time. It's a long time for my vocal cords to be talking to myself for. But you can visit our Facebook page, facebook.com/Wrestling Roundup. It's Wrestling Roundup Radio. See, I'm already forgetting our links. And twitter.com/Wrestling R Radio. I got them right this time. And I'll see you next week.